to another edition of Scorekeeping by Kenosha Opera Festival. Now, I have to start by explaining a little bit more about my background. Unlike co-founder Nick, I haven't been deeply submerged in opera for years and years. My roots are in classical violin and then eventually music theater. I've had the benefit of being buried in these scores, either by being a violinist in the pit or by being the music director or the conductor for a show. I did dabble in opera for a few years, but my main knowledge base is the glitz and glamour of a good Broadway show. And there's almost nothing that can top the spectacle of the Phantom of the Opera. I was just a little girl when my parents first played the 2-CD album out of our family boombox, and I've been captivated ever since. I mean, this had to be good stuff if my non-musician dad liked it, right? As I've gotten older, I've really found that Phantom possesses an incredibly unique power to call to people of all walks of life. People like my dad, who didn't find their comfort zone in Rodgers and Hammerstein or Sondheim, found themselves tapping their foot to the infectious driving bass line of the title number, or miming playing rock organ during a particularly captivating listening session. This is not the Eddie Van Halen our parents grew up on, and yet somehow a staggering 130 million have seen the show in 28 countries and 148 cities in 13 languages. In fact, The Phantom of the Opera may be the most successful entertainment franchise of all time. It has grossed $5.6 billion worldwide, more than Avatar, more than Titanic, and more than all the Star Wars films combined. Okay, it's successful. So what? Well, a fascinating misunderstanding has developed out of the international fanaticism that is Phantom. Okay, raise your hand if you've said or you've ever heard someone say, "Oh, opera? I like opera. I love Phantom of the Opera."
I love Phantom of the Opera.
Right? So it's not just me. And let me say right away, this video is not meant to shame anyone for feeling this way. This show has brought millions of people into proximity with an art form with which they would not have been previously engaged. That in and of itself is an achievement worth celebrating. But let's take a few steps back here and talk about where the line is between music theater and opera, and where, if at all, Phantom straddles that line. We could write a thesis on the textbook definitions of opera and music theater and their implications in modern society. Actually, Nick and I did. But clearly the textbook definition of opera isn't what drew people to Phantom in the first place. Having opera in the title of the show is something that might normally scare a certain demographic away from the theater, but the opposite has occurred. So when I ask certain people why they think Phantom is opera, they most often reference this part. Intimidatingly high range might remind you of the vocal gymnastics you might hear in more traditional operatic performances, such as Queen of the Night aria. So what's the difference? Nearly invisible to the audience, but all the difference to the performer, is the microphone on each and every singer on the musical stage. Operatic performers are never electronically amplified. They are trained to fill an opera house on their own lung capacity and their technique magic alone. There's a reason that there are different voice programs for opera and music theater. The technique is so vastly different. I'm not saying that what an actress playing Christine Daae pulls off is not still incredibly impressive, but the integration of acoustic amplification and the expertise of a sound engineer changed the vocal production and perception significantly. To be fair, the less trained ear doesn't notice these differences. And certainly, some of the singing in Phantom doesn't sound like your typical South Pacific or Sound of Music. So let's turn to the accompaniment next. The orchestra for an opera can vary in size and instrumentation, but overall will mostly look like your traditional symphony orchestra. A string section, a woodwind section, a brass section, and a percussion section. Phantom of the Opera does not disappoint with representation in all 4 sections, in fact, boasting 3 French horn parts, a harp, and a large string section. What's enormously different is the inclusion of 2 keyboard/synthesizer parts, which produce the sounds of the electric guitar, electric bass, and rock organ. The aesthetic goals of this orchestration have been described as electropop beat, terminology one could hardly apply to the operatic scores of the 18th and 19th centuries. Who's to say that Phantom of the Opera didn't single-handedly modernize the operatic art form? Surprisingly, what makes an opera and a musical is more than just the songs. How the plot is developed and what happens in between major numbers sets these 2 genres apart. Operas very rarely feature spoken words between the songs, and so the entire performance is usually sung through, whereas a musical will feature passages of dialogue interspersed throughout the piece. Phantom of the Opera honors the classical tradition sporadically, often as part of the introduction to a number like Prima Donna or Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again. But there is also a decent amount of dialogue that spurs on the plot and fills in gaps not covered in song. This is not a weakness, but rather a great example of the integrated musical, one that combines acting, song, and dance into one cohesive story. There's a similar term coined by Wagner, which means all-encompassing art. Gesamtkunstwerk. Gesamtkunstwerk. Additionally, some of the most operatic parts of the show are simply pastiche, vocabulary word of the day, meaning a reference back to an earlier art form. Andrew Lloyd Webber, though not intending to write an opera outright, knew that he was including many operatic elements to make the story setting feel believable and genuine. If this story is meant to take place in an opera house, one would certainly expect to hear opera and see them preparing operatic performances, which you see in their show within a shows of Hannibal, Il Muto, and Don Juan Triumphant. It's been said that Webber borrowed styles for these portions of Phantom from composers such as Meyerbeer, Mozart, and even Gilbert and Sullivan. In fact, Don Juan is the Spanish spelling of Don Giovanni, Mozart's famous opera. In recognizing this, we start to realize that Phantom is a musical wearing an opera suit. Or maybe an opera wearing a musical suit? It depends how you look at it and what characters and moments of the plot you're analyzing. The secondary characters, like Carlotta and the house managers, are at many times parodies of personalities you might actually have met in an opera house. So, is Phantom honoring the classical tradition or mocking it? Here's where it gets juicy. It's been theorized that Webber did a little more than borrow inspiration from the greats. In 1987, the estate of Puccini, composer of operas like La Bohème and Madame Butterfly, charged in a lawsuit that this two-bar phrase in Music of the Night ripped off the aria Quello che t'accette from Girl of the West, an opera and genre discussed more in this past episode of Scorekeeping. Here's the 2 segments side by side.
Turn your face away from the garish light of day. Turn your thoughts away from cold unfeeling light.
I don't want to take sides, but feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. So, you like Phantom of the Opera, but you're starting to realize it maybe isn't as opera-like as you originally thought. That doesn't mean that you need to turn your back on the world of opera. There are tons of incredible operas that share a lot of similar elements with Phantom. Lucia di Lammermoor by Donizetti is a dark and tragic story complete with a love triangle, a murder, and a dramatic entrance in a blood-stained wedding dress. If you're looking for a good ghost story, you could give Turn of the Screw by Benjamin Britten a try, a gothic romance with eerie hauntings. For those murder mystery lovers, Mozart's Don Giovanni is a classic that will keep you on the edge of your seat with elements of sword fighting, a dangerous investigation, and a spooky and exciting finale. If modern is what you're after, there are 20th and 21st century operas that have taken the world by storm and contain lots of contemporary elements actually borrowed from music theater. We'll be doing a video on that topic in the near future, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. And if none of these operas seem like your cup of tea, a great way to dip your toes in the world of opera would be to start with a lighthearted comedy. Shows like The Barber of Seville, The Marriage of Figaro, and Pirates of Penzance are relatable, easy to follow, and filled with jokes that still land today. Kenosha Opera Festival is excited to be producing a comedic opera just like these next summer as part of our 2021 inaugural season, but you'll have to wait for that big announcement. I'm sure I barely scratched the surface of this long-running mega musical, so let me know what I missed. Would you like to hear more about the connections between opera and music theater, or would you like to hear your favorite musical traced back to its opera roots? Let us know in the comments. And congrats, you made it all the way to the end of the video. If you liked it enough to watch, we hope you like it enough to actually give us a like and subscribe. If you know an opera or music theater buff you think might enjoy our take on Phantom, we would really appreciate it if you would share it with them. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have an awesome and operatic day.